Okay, so with a piecewise function, first thing that I like to do is draw like a little number line. Your split is happening at 4, and that tells you that to the left of 4, you're defined by this 5 minus x function. And then to the right of 4, when x is greater than 4, you're defined by this x over 2 plus 1 function. All right, so with that kind of visual in mind, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the limit as x goes to 4 from the left. So remember that if it's from the left, you cover the right-hand side, right? So if I cover everything to the right of 4, then that tells me that the function that I'm using is 5 minus x. So this first limit will just be a matter of plugging in 4 into 5 minus x. So I'll have 5 minus 4, and that will give us that our limit is 1. Now, when you go to the next part where they ask you to look at 4 from the right, then in that case, you're going to be covering the left. And when you're just coming in from the right of 4, you're going to be working with this x over 2 plus 1 function. So that's the function that you'll plug into. So you'll have 4 over 2 plus 1, and that gives you 2 plus 1. So that gives you 3 as your limit. Okay? Now, when you go to the next part where they ask you for the two-sided limit, remember that if these one-sided limits are not the same, which in this case we have 1 and 3, then that means that automatically the two-sided limit will be a does not exist. And again, you'll just say D and E, and that is because the two-sided or because the one-sided limits, are not the same. Okay, they are not equal, and therefore the two-sided limit will be a does not exist. Okay, so the last two limits that they ask you are actually kind of an extension question. So I'm going to write them down below here. They have the limit as x goes to 8, and remember that the picture that we had was 4 was the split point, and if I was to the left of 4, I was using 5 minus x, and if I was to the right of 4, I was using x over 2 plus 1. So when you look at the limit as x goes to 8, you want to think about where 8 is on the number line. So 8 is going to be somewhere around here, okay? And you'll notice that if you come in from the left-hand side or the right-hand side, it doesn't matter which side you come in from 8, you're always going to be using this x over 2 plus 1. So because when x is going to 8, you're always at this x over 2 plus 1, you do not have to plug into both of these pieces, because at 8, the only function that will matter will be this x over 2 plus 1. So you'll just plug in the 8 into this function. So you'll have 8 over 2 plus 1. That gives you 4 plus 1. So that gives you 5 as your limit. Now, a very similar argument can be made for the last limit here. So again, if you look at the piecewise function, your split is at 4, and you know that to the left of 4, you have this 5 minus x. To the right of 4, you have x over 2 plus 1. But the thing that you really want to be cognizant of and aware of is that at x equals -1, you're not going to be thinking about this function at all, this x over 2 plus 1. At -1, you're only going to be looking at 5 minus x. And again, coming in from the left or right, the only function is going to be the 5 minus x function. So you can plug into that. So you have 5 minus your x will get plugged in as -1. And so that gives you 6 as your two-sided limit for the limit as x goes to -1.